Welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here for video 4, the final video of building the fire tower, so stay tuned. Okay, so welcome back to Stu Structures and welcome to my new subscribers. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. You know, it's great for my analytics, it helps me out, and it gives me a reason to be on here knowing that people are watching my channel. In any case, we are here to continue the build on the fire tower. You know, I want to add an interior to the top of that because this is going to be all glass and open to be able to be seen from the outside. So I want to put some details in there, and I'm going to show you how to make some of that. And you know, we still have the windows to install on this, and then the whole roof truss system and the roof on this. So let's just jump into this and see how much we can get done in this video. Okay, so this is kind of how we left the tower in the last video, and you know, there were several things on the inside that we needed to get finished on this. You know, we had went ahead and got these two handrails around the stairs. You know, this would have also had some type of a trap door or a covering or something that could be locked so people couldn't get up into the tower. So I went through all my little boxes that have all my detail stuff in it, and I thought, well, you know, here's several things that could probably work on the inside of that tower. But there's several things I think I need to make to beef up the items in there as well. And I decided I was going to go ahead and make some shelves. You saw some books in that last picture there, so I need something to put books on and that radio. So I just created this little shelf unit out of some scrap balsa wood that I had in my box. And most of the interior on this, I'm going to paint a green color, because that's, you know, the Department of Natural Resources, that's just one of their colors they use for a lot of things. So I started painting the shelves, and I had a box to put some stuff in, this radio and the books. So I just start putting paint on everything. That table in that first picture as well, I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and paint that green as well. And that gives me, you know, the basis for that. But all right, now what would have they had in this shed? And one of the things I thought of is, you know, this is a USGS map of part of the mountains in West Virginia. And I thought, well, you know, they might have had some of these on that table so they could locate fires once they spot them with scopes or whatever they used. So I'm going to create some maps to put on the table. And I just do some like 2 by 3 foot in HO scale and cut 4 of those. And a couple of these would have been buried under the pile, so I don't really have to make maps for 2 of them. But 2 of them I'm going to come back and put some paint on, and you know, these aren't predicting or, you know, showing anything in particular. It's just mountains and trees and whatever that might have been on the maps. And I come back and glue a couple of those on top of each other and put the 4 of those in a pile on the table. And that gives them some maps to locate some things once they spot things in scopes. And then, you know, that's the first thing. I can come back and glue into the center of this room, and my first piece of furniture for the inside of this is in place. Now, you know, that bench had a guy sitting on it, and, you know, part of those people's uniforms are different browns and greens and various colors. I'm not sure what the people working in this tower would have been, but I'm going to paint the green bench that same color and put this guy in a uniform, paint his hair and boots, and go ahead and mount this in the tower as well. So now there's a person occupying the top of the tower. In that bookcase, I kind of showed you this picture earlier. You know, I'm going to go ahead and finish painting these books and get them in the bookcase and put this radio up on top of that so that there's something for them, you know, to do in there. And I don't know what kind of books or reference materials they would have had, or whether it just would have been reading for their personal pleasure or whatever, but I figured, well, you know, there may have been some books in there. So once I put another layer of green on the shelves and put this stuff in them, I go ahead and mount the shelves in there. So that's another piece of, you know, hardware for up inside. And I thought, you know, they probably have a desk for communications or something as well. So I'm just going to come through and, you know, just make another wooden desk to go inside of that. So, I glue 2 supports to 2 legs for the desk and get those squared up, and then I'm going to come back and glue those together as a base for everything, and then glue a top onto that. So here's just a rough table, and I just left this in the natural wood color. Now, what would have been on this table for communications? There probably would have been some type of a military radio or a base radio. I mean, years ago I had a base station for a CB radio, and I thought, well, I'm just going to put something together like that. So I cut a couple of pieces of styrene, and I'm going to glue those into a square so that it makes, a decent size what could have been the base unit for the radio itself. And then I thought, okay, it's got to have a microphone, so I just found a couple of odd pieces of tubing and styrene and kind of put a square mic on top of a stand, and I'm going to glue that onto a base here, and basically that's kind of a microphone, so that'll work. And I just, I'm going to go ahead and put some paint on those. I painted the box and kind of put a little meter on the front of it, and I painted the microphone and glued both of those to the desk. And the microphone would have been wired into the radio. So I just looked across the top of my workbench, and I had some more of this braided copper wire. So I'm just going to bend a piece that would work and cut it to length that would connect the microphone to that radio. So I go ahead and paint that and put it in place, and now I have a radio on the desk that can be used by these guys to call for help or whatever may be needed for communications. And then I go ahead and glue that into the room up here as well. And basically that gives me the basis for what may have been in that room. I don't know. I also painted that box and put it beside the bench on the floor. Now the other thing I had mentioned was a trap door as well. And I just found some real thin balsa wood and scribed some boards in it. And I'm just going to paint this black. And once I get that painted black, I thought, well, there would have been a lock or something on there, probably a handle in the least. So I just found some real small wire and bent a handle that I could glue onto the top of that trap door. And I thought, okay, well, that'll work. The hinges would have been behind it on the wall side, so you really won't see the hinges. So after I paint that black, I just go ahead and glue that at the top of the opening, so it could have, came down and been used as a trap door. And basically, that's about everything I need for inside of this. So here's just another shot of the opposite end of that, and you can see everything in the room at this point in time. Now I need to finish coming back and working on the windows, and this is kind of how I left them at the end of last week, and I had started to get some of this framing on the plexiglass, and it's kind of weavy, looks like a drunk person put it together, but I thought, okay, well, this would have been separated into panes, so I'm going to come back and add some mullins to break these into 3 panes on each side. So I do the one in the center and then just divide the distance and put 2 more, and I'm going to do this on all 3 sides of that glass. And then basically I have the main unit to glue onto the top. So I just come back and glue all this into place. And I'm going to have to come back and touch up the silver, and I'm kind of deciding at this point that, this is going to need some more trim on it too. But basically I glue these 3 sides on here, and I'm just going to build these other 2 sides that meet the door while it's here in place. So I go ahead and cut the styrene for those 2 windows on either side of the door, and I come back and glue those onto there. And those don't have the trim on the top and the bottom, so I need to come back and start adding trim to that as well. But basically, that's the windows in place minus all the trim at this point in time. Now, I do need to start coming back and adding trim to these, and on top of all the windows, I want to put a heavy beam that would have carried the weight of the roof too. So I went outside to just, went ahead and put silver paint on these pieces here, and I'm also going to add some 4x4, heavy pieces to the insides of the corner, just to beef this structure up a little bit and make it a little more sound. And then I start coming back through and I'm adding those beams on the top, and at the top and bottom of the windows, once these are in place, I'm going to do some trim too, and that'll clean up the look of the windows a little bit. But basically, here's all the beams on the top. So, you know, they're all glued into place, and I'm just going to come back and put the trim and put some silver paint on the top of the windows and doors, and basically that's this whole assembly to this point together for the structure part of this. Now the next thing I need to do is figure out a roof for this, and you know, I want this to be a four-sided roof that comes to a point in the middle of this. So I measured the bottom edge of where that building was, and I came out, you know, another 4 foot from the center point, and then just came up with my angles, and basically I came up with a point that I needed to cut these two squares and cut them in half, and that would give me 4 sides for this roof. And basically, you know, this, unless I do some more angling on these, this is going to give me a flat roof, not an up-pitched angled roof. So what I do is come to the lower point on either side of those, and I'm going to take a half of an HO scale foot to a 0 point at the top point and just cut these off of all 4 of those windows, or the tops to these, like this here. And basically at this point I'm not sure how much a rise in the roof this will give me, but this will allow the roof, once I bring those lower edges together, to a point. And then I just take a sanding block and I do just take a little bit of the edge off where all these panels meet each other, because they're not going to be perfect square. And I put a metal square down on my table and start gluing the first 2 together. And looking at this as I go, I decide, well, you know, this is not a bad pitch to that roof, so I'm going to go ahead and go with this. So I went ahead and glued the 3rd side onto this, and then I'm going to come back and put the 4th side onto this. And that's the basic flat parts of the roof together. Now there's a lot of other little pieces that go on to this to make it a roof. I'm going to make this a raised seam metal roof. So I come through and, you know, at first I'm measuring for every 2 foot where I want the seams in the middle going up through the whole panels on all 4 sides. And you know, normally I would have ran the seams up and then put the joints over these long seams on afterwards, but I decided I didn't want to fight with that. So I cut these long paper strips, and I'm just going to cut seams to cover where these 4 panels come together. And I cut my angles on the top and the bottom and glue those into place over all of the joints. And I'm just going to continue around the roof and do these to all 4 sides of those. And once those are on place, I want to do just some slightly square top that covers all 4 of these where they meet in the very top. So I just cut a piece of paper and put that on the top, and that basically gives me all my seams and joints all covered to where it would have been waterproof as a metal roof. Now to create the raising seams in this, I'm going to use this 10 by 20 styrene strips, which are just little fine, tiny strips. And you know, I didn't come back and put a square on this and square all these lines up. I did a couple of them and figured I'm just going to sight it in with a couple of long ones and just start coming through and adding all these. And I had some small parts, so I started with the smallest one, using all my small parts up. And once I get several of them in place like this, because some of them are just really long and need to make up some of these, I just let them run wild. And then once they're glued and the glue has set up, I turn it over and then cut them off exactly flush with the bottom of this. And I just finish all of these, and that's all my raised seams in place on the roof. So I can go outside and put some paint on that, and now I have the outside part of the roof of this done. You know, and this looks pretty good. It probably would have had an antenna or something on top of it for the radio, but you know, at that point I went ahead and set this on top of my structure and measured made marks where the outlines of all those windows and beams were. And basically it's about 3.5 or so foot. It kind of varies a little here and there throughout this because this is just willy-nilly done. So I decided, okay, I'm going to add rafters under the bottom side of this. And I'm going to use this 20 by 80 styrene to make all the rafter tails that you're going to see hanging out from underneath the roof. So I come back and measure the top of all four sides, and I just went ahead and marked all these 2 foot on centers as well. And I'm going to make these 3 foot. That gives me plenty of leeway on the inside. So, I put one of these pieces up to the building and figured out the angle, because I want these to be 90 degrees to the ground, not the edge of the roof. So I came back and cut the 40 of these need at 3 foot long and start gluing all these into place. I'm going to start with the corners first, because there's 2 straight pieces on either side of that actually come up and meet this beam. And you can see these do run a little short. Now, I put these on backwards to begin with, and I just put a few on each side to try and fit the roof to make sure I wasn't going to have problems with this, and realized my mistake and came back and reversed those. And then everything fit well on the roof, so I came back and added all the rest of my, the beams coming down on all the sides of the roof. So now I can go ahead and put black paint on these. And once this paint dries, I go ahead and fit it on the roof. And, once I switch those rafters around like they should have been to begin with, everything fits really well and it sits on here. And this is just going to be removable. I'm not going to glue this into place. I may want to come back later and add the antenna and wires and even a light in there. I don't know. Now the next thing is adding handrails on the outside of that platform. And I'd found all these earlier in all of my stuff and decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and cut these. They're not perfect size, but they work close enough. So I take them out and put some silver paint on them and bring them back in. And just, one by one, I start cutting these to length and gluing them on the sides of the platform. Because we really don't want guys falling off this 50-foot tall structure and killing themselves. So I go through and put all of these on and glue the corners, a couple of them a little long, so I had to leave the corners extended from one side and glue those together, and the handrails are all the way around. Now there's one other thing for detail that I want to make for this building, and I went through and found a bunch of my styrene tubing of all different sizes and round stock. And I put this biggest piece in my vise and just cut off 2 real thin round pieces. I also went and found a straw, because there's a couple of pieces I'm going to need in a minute, and you'll understand why when we get into this a little further. But I take this straw and just cut a real thin slice off the end of this and cut this into 2 half rounds. So now I have all these pieces, and I have another flat piece of real thin styrene to glue everything to start from. And to begin with, I'm going to come through and just glue those real thin flat pieces that I put onto that flat styrene, and then glue the next size down styrene round tubing into the center of that. And then I put just a very small piece on the top of this, because what I'm mounting on top of this, I want to swivel. And this will make it look like it has the ability to swivel around. And then I take the next size down tubing piece, and those half round pieces, I'm going to glue to either side of that half round piece that it extends down below it just a little bit. And then I'm going to take the next size up and just cut a real thin sliver and put on one end of each of these tubes. And then once I have that in place, I'm going to come through and just put the other tiny little piece onto the other end of that. So basically now we have 2 sub-assemblies that I'm going to glue together. So I glue that half round piece of orange straw there onto the top of this, and it looks like basically a spy glass or a looking glass, so they could have spotted fires somewhere out in the distance. I don't know what these would have been called, but I figured they had to have something to search the horizon for, fires. So I put some silver paint on these and put some black and shiny stuff on either end of it, so it looks like they're hollow and you could see through them. And I come back and mount those on the inside of the handrails, one on each opposite side of the building. And this would have given them, 360-degree viewing all around the building from these 2 points. So they could have looked for fires all night long and went from side to side and, taken a look for fires. And basically that's everything I'm going to put on the building at this time. Like I said, later we may come back and add some lights or anything, but I'm taking a couple of shots here on my desk just to kind of give you an idea of how this ended up at this point. And I like this. It's a nice looking structure, and I'm very pleased at the way this turned out. So now I'm going to end this series like I do all series. I'm going to put this on the turntable and just give this a couple of spins so you can see it kind of from all angles. Not like all 4 sides aren't just about basically the same. But, looking from every angle, it looks like a pretty good little structure. I do see one handrail that's broke that I'm going to have to go back and glue and repair. I noticed it in the last couple of pictures that I had posted there too. But, I like this. I'd like to do some weathering on it, but basically it's a nice structure. And I just want to bring one little other fact to everybody's attention. As you're scratch building and building structures, you end up with tons of slight little pieces of debris. And one thing I always do is I save all this debris and keep it in little cups and eventually transfer it to baggies. Once this one's full, I will do that. But I like taking these and just making gondola loads out of them and turning them all into rusted iron and stuff like that. A few pieces you may have to cut up a little smaller, but if you put some foam or something in the bottom of a gondola and just dress it with all this stuff on top and weather it, it makes a really nice scrap load for your gondolas. So don't waste all this stuff as you come to it. Use it for another project down the road. So there you have the last segment of building the fire tower. It's other than the roof coming off of it, it's really, a pretty sound structure. I like building things that you don't have to be particularly careful, how you handle them, especially since I'm storing a lot of this stuff until I can get my layout built or a place to put my layout. So a lot of it ends up inside foam and stuff in boxes, and, just tossing boxes around or whatever can damage a lot of really fragile stuff. So, all in all, I mean, it's really, it's a pretty solid little structure, and I'm happy the way it turned out. Anybody that scratch builds could spend more time and break out the micrometers and the tiny tools and magnify everything to a greater degree than I do, and you can get a whole lot, well, maybe not a whole lot, but you can get a better level of degree of realism out of things than what I strive for. I mean, I don't want to get up to things with a magnifying glass and look at nuts and bolts. I just don't. And this is going to be a background structure up on a mountain behind the main ideas that I have going on with the trains and the other buildings at trackside. So this to me wasn't a major priority to make it picturesque, so to speak, but I'm happy with it. Is it exactly like real life? I don't know. I mean, the pictures that I found, I would say this is probably pretty close. There's probably a little bit of artist license that went into this with a couple of things, and I don't have pictures of the one that was really on the mountain, a mile and a half, 2 miles from the house here. I know it looks similar to this. When I was in high school, they had the stairwells all caged off so you couldn't climb up to the tower. So we used to climb up the outside of the tower to go up to the top. Back when you thought you were going to live forever and death wasn't an issue. And the heights don't bother me, so that was never an issue. But I don't have pictures of it. And this was similar to what that one was. I'm sure it's not exact, but I really can't remember. That's been years and years ago, how close this may be to the original that was up there. I mean, paint schemes may be a little different, and a few things I don't really know. But this will serve the purpose, and for anybody that, you know, sees the Billington scene and sees this up in the background, it may remind them of the fire tower that was up here at one time. And that's my goal. You know, I always say to get the flavor of. So anyway, I'm going to quit rambling. This video has taken a little longer to put together than, you know, some of my regular videos. I don't know, we're maybe coming up on a half hour. I didn't really look at the time on the video sequencing, but anyway, this turned out to be a good build. Come back and let's jump into another building in the next session. I do still have a couple of Tuesday videos, I think, coming out at this point in time. So before long, things are going to slow down with my work and my business. So, you know, just so you're aware, you know, I might only be putting up Friday videos. And once I get into full swing, those might be interrupted every now and then too with work. So anyway, thanks to my new subscribers. I appreciate you coming and sharing this time with me. I hope you learned some little tidbits here and there that help you in your hobby. And I hope you're jumping out there with some materials and scratch building something. You know, even if it's just an outhouse behind a kit of a house, or, you know, a garage or anything. Just scratch build something and play with things. You'll be surprised at the self-satisfaction you get out of doing something like that. So in any case, grab some stuff, play with your trains. Happy model railroading.